Hi boys and girls, it's Mrs. Klersy. I'm going to be reading you The Fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Morris Lessmore. Sorry. Morris Lessmore loved words. He loved stories. He loved books. His life was a book of his own writing, one orderly page after another. He would open it every morning and write of his joys and sorrows, of all that he knew, and everything that he'd hoped for. But every story has its upsets. One day, the sky darkened. The winds blew and blew till everything Morris knew was scattered, even the words of his book. You can see him looking all kind of sad right there. Looking a little upset and gray. He didn't know what to do, which way to go, so he began to wander and wonder. Then a happy bit of happenstance came his way. Rather than looking down, as had become his habit, Morris Lessmore looked up. Drifting through the sky above him, Morris saw a lovely lady. She was being pulled along by a festive squadron of flying books. Morris wondered if his book could fly, but it couldn't. It would only fall to the ground with a depressing thud. The flying lady knew Morris simply needed a good story, so she sent him her favorite. The book was an amiable fellow and urged Morris to follow him. And if you notice, the little character in the book, he's even waving along Mr. Morris Lessmore. He looks a bit confused. I would be too if a book was telling me to follow along. The book led him to an extraordinary building where many books apparently nested. And if you notice, Mr. Morris Lessmore is still in gray here. Wonder why that is. Morris slowly walked inside and discovered the most mysterious and inviting room he had ever seen. It was filled with the fluttering of countless pages, and Morris could hear the faint chatter of 1,000 different stories, as if each book was a whispering and invitation to adventure. Okay, so he's walking in on this wondrous place. Then his new friend flew up to him and landed on his arm. It held itself open, as if hoping to be read. The room rustled to life. And so Morris's life among the books began. Morris tried to keep the books in some sort of order, but they always mixed themselves up. The tragedies needed cheering up and would visit with the comedies. The encyclopedias, weary of facts, would relax with the comic books and the fictions. All in all, it was an agreeable jumble. Morris found great satisfaction in caring for the books, gently fixing those with fragile bindings, and unfolding the dog-eared pages of others. Probably my favorite picture in this story is him looking like he's a doctor taking care of the books. And look, he looks all worried. That little guy looks all worried. Don't worry, his friend will be okay. Sometimes Morris would become lost in a book and scarcely emerged for days. He's getting lost in his books. Oh, still reading, still lost in his book. Morris liked to share the books with others. Sometimes it was a favorite that everyone loved, and other times he found a lonely little volume whose tale was seldom told. Everyone's story matters, said Morris, and all the books agreed. And if you notice in this picture, everybody that's in line is in black and white, and then once they get a book from Morris, like this little boy here, suddenly he's all colorful and cheery again. That's what books can do to you. At night, after all the stories that needed telling had been told, and everyone had settled down to their proper places on the shelves, the great big dictionary would get in the last word. Zzz. It was then that Morris Lessmore would once again write in his own book. He wrote of his joys and sorrows, of all that he knew and everything that he'd hoped for. And there you see him sitting there writing in his book. The days passed. So did the months. And then years and years. And he's getting older and older with each page. And Morris Lessmore became stooped and crinkly. But the books never changed. Their story stayed the same. Now his old friends took care of him the way he had once cared for them. And they read themselves to him each night. And if you notice in this story, the little book that he originally started with, it looks like he's performing. Then one day, he filled the last page in his book. He looked up and said with a bittersweet sigh, I guess it's time for me to move on. The books were sorry, but they had understood. Morris put on his hat and took his cane. As he went to the door, he turned and smiled, then waved goodbye. I'll carry you all in here, he said, and pointed to his heart. There you see him saying goodbye. The books waved their pages, and Morris Lessmore flew away. And as he flew, he changed back to the way he'd been that long ago day when they'd all first met. But now, he's in color. The books were quiet for a while. Then they noticed that Morris Lessmore had left something behind. It's his book, said one of his oldest friends. Inside was Morris's story. All of his joys and sorrows, all that he knew, and everything that he'd hoped for. And there's his book, right up there. If you heard a little jingle ball, that was my cat. Then the books heard a small, expectant sound. There in the doorway was a little girl. She looked around with wonder. Then something fantastic happened. Morris Lessmore's book flew up to her and opened its pages. The girl began to read. And so our story ends as it began, with the opening of a book. You can see the girl reading. Okay. And that is the end of our story. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you guys are staying safe, and that we hope to see you real soon back at Cleveland. Take care.